On my wedding day, my father told the guests I was a failure, and I stood there holding the mic. On the happiest day of my life, I expected love, blessings, and proud tears. Instead, my father's voice echoed through the hall, slicing through laughter like a blade. My daughter, she's always been a failure. Glasses froze midair, whispers spread, and I stood with the microphone trembling in my hand. My name is Emily Carter. I was 28 years old on that day, the day that was supposed to be the beginning of my forever. The church bells had just faded, the tables were dressed in white linen, flowers glowed in soft candlelight. Friends smiled, relatives embraced, and for a moment I thought I finally belonged in my own story. I held the microphone, ready to thank everyone. My hands trembled, not from nerves but from the weight of every year I had waited to feel proud of myself. My fiancé Daniel squeezed my hand under the table, his eyes steady, warm. And then, my father stood. He raised his glass, smiling at the guests but not at me. His words poured out sharp and cold. She's never lived up to anything. Even today she stands here in a dress someone else paid for, pretending to be something she's not. Laughter died. Silence spread like smoke. I felt my throat close. My mother lowered her eyes. Guests shifted uncomfortably. And in that moment I was 7 years old again, watching myself disappear in the shadow of my father's disappointment. The pattern began long before wedding gowns and speeches. I was the second daughter, the quiet one, the one who colored inside the lines. My older brother Ryan was the star. From the day he kicked his first football, my father had someone to be proud of. When I brought home gold stars, they glanced and nodded. When Ryan scored a single goal, Dad told the neighbors, the pastor, even strangers at the grocery store. He was the pride. I was the filler. At 8 years old, I won a local writing contest. My story about a girl who found courage in the woods was printed in the county paper. That night, I waited for him to mention it at dinner. Instead, he leaned across the table and said, "Ryan made varsity soccer. Isn't that something?" My mother clapped. My story, untouched, sat folded by my plate. I learned then that silence was my applause. That no matter how brightly I tried to shine, it would never reflect back in his eyes. And on my wedding day, as his words cut deep, I realized he was still the same man. High school was supposed to be my fresh start. I worked hard, stayed late in the library, earned straight A's. Teachers called me driven, but at home, that word carried no weight. The spring of junior year, I was awarded Student of the Year. The ceremony meant everything to me. I slipped the invitation into my father's hand at breakfast. He barely looked up from his paper. "When is it?" "Saturday," I whispered. He shook his head. "Ryan's got playoffs. You know how important that is. You'll understand." Saturday came. I stood on stage with a medal around my neck, scanning the crowd for a face that never appeared. My friends' families cheered, flowers in hand, but my seat stayed empty. Later that evening, I walked into our living room. Ryan was covered in grass stains, and Dad beamed as if he had won the World Cup. "We're going out to celebrate," he said. "Emily, can you tidy the kitchen while we change?" I carried plates to the sink, biting my lip until it bled. That night, I promised myself one day I'd give myself the applause I never received. College was freedom, but it was also survival. Scholarships covered tuition, but food and books, that was on me. I worked mornings at the campus cafe, evenings tutoring, weekends in a bookstore. My father sent checks to Ryan for his sports gear. For me, there was silence. Still, I pushed on. 4 years later, I stood in a cap and gown, the first in our family to graduate with honors. I called home, hope alive in my chest. "Dad, the ceremony's this Saturday. I'd love if you and Mom could come." Silence stretched. Then, "That's Ryan's engagement weekend. We're hosting people here. You know how family is." I hung up, my tassel damp with tears. At the ceremony, I walked across the stage to polite applause from strangers. My heart ached for a cheer that never came. That summer, Ryan's engagement party overflowed with balloons, champagne, speeches. I helped refill glasses, quiet in the corner. My father raised his glass. "To my son who makes us proud every day." I whispered to myself, "One day I'll be proud without you." Love found me when I wasn't searching. Daniel was everything my father wasn't: gentle, patient, someone who saw me. We met in the bookstore where I shelved novels. He noticed the worn notebook I carried everywhere. "Writer?" he asked with a smile. I nodded, embarrassed. "Just dreams." Dreams make the world move, he replied, and I believed him. Daniel read every page I wrote. He clapped when I doubted myself. He showed up for the small things, walks in the rain, burnt dinners, rejected job applications. And for the first time in my life, I felt seen. When he proposed under fairy lights in our tiny apartment, I cried not just for love, but for the proof that someone chose me fully. Planning the wedding, though, meant stepping back into my father's world. Invitations went out, relatives prepared speeches, and I prayed just once that he would be proud. That maybe on this day I wouldn't be invisible. But as I stood with the microphone, hearing his words slice through the joy, I knew I had hoped for too much. Whispers filled the reception hall. Some guests looked at me with pity. Others avoided my eyes. My cheeks burned, but Daniel squeezed my hand steady as stone. I swallowed hard, forcing a smile. "Thank you everyone for being here tonight," I managed, my voice trembling. "This day means more than I can say." But my father leaned back, smirking as if he had won something. My mother dabbed her lips with a napkin, silent as ever. After the cake was cut, I slipped outside. The night air was cold, heavy with crickets. My dress trailed on the pavement as tears stained my cheeks. Daniel followed, wrapping his jacket around my shoulders. "You don't need their approval, Em," he whispered. "But why does it still hurt?" I asked, my voice breaking. He kissed my forehead. "Because you're human. But someday you'll tell your story, and they won't be able to silence you." I didn't know then that he was right. That night planted a seed in me, one that would grow into a truth I couldn't hide anymore. The weeks after the wedding felt like living in two worlds. On one side, joy with Daniel, our first apartment, late-night laughter, shared dreams. On the other, the echo of my father's words replayed in my mind. "She's always been a failure." I tried to bury it, but at family gatherings it surfaced again. Thanksgiving, Christmas, birthdays. He never missed a chance to remind people of my supposed shortcomings. One night, at Daniel's urging, I submitted one of my stories to a local magazine. I didn't expect anything. But weeks later, an email arrived. "We'd love to publish your piece." My hands shook. Tears blurred the screen. For the first time, someone outside Daniel believed in me. The magazine arrived in the mail, my name printed in bold. I held it close, then tucked it in a drawer, terrified my father would scoff at it. But inside, a quiet fire burned. I had proof that I wasn't invisible. And little by little, that fire would grow too bright for anyone, even him, to ignore. Years passed, and the fire became a blaze. I wrote, I published. I carved out a career from words my father once dismissed as childish. By 30, I had 3 books on shelves, speaking invitations, a community of readers who wrote me letters saying, "Your story saved me." But at family dinners, none of it mattered. My father would pat Ryan on the back, boasting about his promotions, his new house, his car. When relatives asked about me, Dad waved it off. "Emily writes little things here and there. Nothing big." Each time my chest tightened, but I stayed silent. Until one afternoon, Daniel found me crying over another family gathering gone wrong. He knelt beside me, eyes fierce. "Emily, stop hiding. Stop letting them write your story for you. You've built a life from your pain. Don't you see? You've already won." His words echoed in me. Maybe it was time to stop whispering my truth. Maybe it was time to hold the microphone again, but this time, not to thank them. This time to tell them who I really was. The chance came sooner than I expected. 6 months after the wedding, my cousin Olivia asked if I could host the family's spring reunion. Our usual restaurant had closed, and everyone was scrambling. Daniel squeezed my hand, whispering, "This is it. Your stage." I hesitated. The thought of standing in front of my father again made my stomach twist. But then I remembered the years of silence, the medals, the graduation, the books, all the moments erased by his dismissal. Maybe this was the moment I had been waiting for. I booked a hall in town, filled it with soft lights, fresh flowers, and music that stirred the heart. Each table carried personalized place cards with words of gratitude written in my hand. The night arrived. Laughter and chatter filled the room. My father walked in, scanning the place, clearly impressed, though his lips never formed the words. As dinner began, I felt my heartbeat echo through the hall. This time I wasn't a trembling girl. I was a woman who had built something real, and I was ready to hold the microphone again. Halfway through dinner, my father stood. His glass rose high, his voice loud enough to hush the room. "Another fine evening," he began, nodding as though he owned the moment. "But let's be honest, Emily has always liked to put on a show. This is just another illusion, another borrowed stage. She's never been more than a dreamer who hides behind pretty words. The words fell like stones. Guests shifted uncomfortably, eyes flicking toward me. Daniel's jaw tightened. Olivia clenched her fork, but I stood calm, steady. My knees trembled, but my voice did not. I held the microphone and let silence stretch. "You're right about one thing, Dad," I said softly. "I do dream. And those dreams carried me when no one else believed I could walk." I motioned to Daniel, who handed me a stack of books. My books. I placed them on the table in front of him, each one with my name shining across the cover. "This is not an illusion," I said, my voice gaining strength. "This is my life, my truth, my work." The room went silent. Gasps echoed through the hall as relatives leaned forward, flipping through pages of my novels. Their eyes widened at dedications, at reviews printed on the back covers. My father's hand froze on his glass midair. "This can't be," he muttered. But Olivia rose from her chair, fire in her voice. "Uncle, she's been published for years. She's touched lives you'll never know. While you've been tearing her down, she's been building something beautiful." Applause broke out, hesitant at first, then growing louder. My grandmother, frail but sharp-eyed, began clapping with trembling hands. Cousins joined in, aunts wiped tears. For the first time, I stood in the center of a room not as an afterthought, but as someone who mattered. My father's face went pale. My mother stared at the tablecloth, shame painting her cheeks. But I didn't look at them anymore. My eyes scanned the faces of those who finally saw me, and I realized something life-changing. I had been waiting all these years for him to clap, but I never needed his hands. I had found my own. The evening carried on, though everything had shifted. Guests lined up to congratulate me, to tell me they had no idea. "Why didn't you share sooner, Emily?" they asked. I smiled through tears, replying, "Because I was afraid no one would listen." Later, when the music softened and plates were cleared, my father approached me outside. The night was cool, stars scattered like quiet witnesses. "You embarrassed me in there," he said, voice low, sharp. "You made me look like a fool." I looked at him for a long time, studying the man I had spent my life chasing approval from. His shoulders weren't as straight as I remembered. His eyes held more insecurity than power. "I didn't embarrass you," I said quietly. "You did that yourself." I just finally told the truth. For once he had no answer. He turned away, silence heavier than words. And in that silence I finally felt free. Weeks passed. My father didn't call. My mother sent a short message and we didn't know. "We're sorry." I didn't reply. Instead, I poured myself into my writing, my marriage, my peace. Letters from readers piled up on my desk. Women who felt unseen, men who carried childhood wounds, young girls who finally believed they mattered. One afternoon, a letter arrived from a teenager named Hannah. "Your book kept me alive. I thought I was worthless, but your words reminded me I'm not invisible." I pressed the paper to my chest, tears flooding. In that moment, it clicked. I hadn't written for my father. I had written for Hannah, for anyone who ever sat in silence waiting to be seen. Daniel hugged me, whispering, "This is your real family, the ones who find themselves in your words." And he was right. Blood had given me pain, but words had given me purpose. Months later, I was invited to speak at a university. The auditorium filled with students, notebooks open, eyes eager. As I stood at the podium, I felt a familiar tremor, the same one from my wedding day, from every stage I had ever faced. But this time it wasn't fear. It was power. I began with honesty. "When I was your age, I thought I was invisible. My family told me I was a failure. But here's the truth. You don't need anyone's permission to matter. You already do." Silence followed, then applause, thunderous, overwhelming. Tears pricked my eyes as I realized I had turned my father's cruelest words into a message that healed others. Walking off stage, I whispered to myself, "This is the applause I was waiting for." And it was never his to give. Years later, on our anniversary, Daniel and I returned to that same hall where my father had tried to break me. This time it was filled with readers, friends, and strangers who had become family. Fairy lights glowed, music swelled, and I stood with the microphone once more. I looked around, not for my father, but for the people who had lifted me higher than his silence ever could. "On my wedding day," I began, voice steady. My father told a room full of guests that I was a failure. But what he didn't know was that failure is not the end of a story. Sometimes it's the beginning. The room rose in applause, not polite but thunderous, real, alive. Daniel's eyes sparkled in the front row. And for the first time in my life, I didn't just feel seen. I felt whole, because I had learned the greatest truth. You don't need a father's voice to define you. You can write your own story, and it can be beautiful. If this story touched your heart, remember, you are not invisible. Your worth isn't defined by anyone's silence or cruelty. You have the power to write your own ending. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and press the bell icon, because your story deserves to be heard.